Today we've got another portable power station to check out. This one is a unique design. It's got some decent specs. It comes in at a good price point. So what do you say we check this thing out? Hey everybody, it's Chris from FamilyGeekery, and today we're going to be checking out the FREMO X700 portable power station. And like I said, this thing's got a unique design. It's kind of a upright design versus a lunchbox style like the most of them in this category are. But it comes from a company I haven't really heard a whole lot of. But I picked one of these up and I wanted to check it out. And I'm going to take you along for that ride. So as we can see, it's a portable power station. I couldn't tell from the pictures like online how big this thing was going to be. And I'll tell you, it's a tiny bit bigger than I thought it was going to be. Now I haven't obviously opened it up yet. But that's not a bad thing. That tells me that, yeah, there's a decent amount of battery in there. Because like I said, it's got some decent specs. It falls into the, I call it the 600 category. You know, you got the small ones, which are in the 2 to 300 watt hour category. You've got the bigger ones that are all in that 1,000 watt hour category. And then we don't have a whole lot in the middle. And this one kind of fits right in the middle there, being in that 600 to 700 watt hours. So we'll look at all the specs. We're going to test this thing out. We're going to look at all the features and see if it's something that might work for you. But let's just take a quick look at the box because it does have some information on it. Like I said, we're going to dive deeper into all the specs as we get this thing opened up. But I'll hit some of the high points. It's called the X700 from FREMO. It's got 662 watt hours of capacity, and it is lithium iron phosphate batteries, which are going to give us a cycle life of 1,500 cycles while it still maintains 80% of its capacity. 600 watt output, that's going to be enough to do a lot of things. Sometimes those 300 watt stations are just a little too small, and sometimes you don't need a full like 1,800 or 2,000 watts of capacity. Sometimes 600 is just everything you need. It's got a color display, a detachable flashlight, that's kind of neat. A solar input of up to 180 watts, that's decent for something this size. It's got some USB-C power delivery ports on it, that's always important. And you can recharge it from 0 to 80% within 3 hours. That's a little slow in the grand scheme of things, but this does have a couple years on it. I don't think this is a brand new product. It's been out for a while, so it's not going to charge up as fast as something that's brand new on the market. But sometimes that's not always a bad thing. So let's go ahead and get this thing out, see how big it actually is, and start checking out some of the features. All right, so here it is, and you can see compared to the box that there was a decent amount of padding in there. It was very well protected, and you can see that it is obviously smaller than the box. Not quite as small as this picture. It's not a life-size picture. And it comes in at 17 pounds. Now it's got a handle that you can carry it with, but 17 pounds. It's not too heavy, it's not too light. It feels good for this size. Now also in that box was this guy here, which is a box of, I'm guessing, probably the manual and the charging cord. But it is pretty hefty, and it's got a quick start guide on the back here showing you where to plug the charger into. So let me open this up and we'll see what's inside. Alright, so inside that box, of course, is going to be a manual. We'll look at that in a second. And then there is a charger brick in there, and it's basically your laptop style charging brick. We're going to have an AC input on this side, and then DC coming out here to charge it up. It is a 180 watt charger, so that's why it takes this thing about 3 hours to charge all the way up, or rather 3 hours to get up to 80%. Here's the AC cable for it that comes with it. And then it does come with a DC charger, so cigarette lighter plug to charge it while you're in the car. I'm sure that will go up to probably close to 100 watts. And then we had this little adapter here, or extender. I'm not sure what it is yet. I'll figure that out. Maybe it's an adapter from one size to another, but we'll figure that out. But let's take a quick look at the actual unit itself. I said this is a little unique design, being tall like this. But all of our inputs and outputs are right here. We've got all of our DC outputs here. We got some AC outlets here. We got some more DC outlets down here. And then our input both for solar or car charger or the wall charger. Now another thing unique about it is the display is up top here. And it's this little round thing here. And I think they said, I saw somewhere that they called it a watch display. Maybe they use the same display that's in like the Samsung watches, because it is round and it's very bright, very colorful, so we'll check that out. It is a kind of convenient location if you're using this thing. It's kind of an inconvenient location if you're reviewing it on a YouTube video and you have to keep on tipping forward to look at it, but we'll get through that. And then on the other side here is the detachable flashlight, and it's underneath this little warning label / hey, this is a removable flashlight sticker here. But that's kind of neat. We'll test that out, see how that works. But yeah, let me look at some of the documentation real quick, and then we'll come back, we'll talk about all the specs, and then we'll turn it on and test it out. So as expected, in the little folder is of course a decent user manual, and then a nice little set of stickers. And these look kind of familiar. I recently reviewed a Vigor Pool power station that had similar looking stickers. But yeah, stick them on your stuff. Show everybody that you're a proud FREMO owner. But let's go over some of the specs here before we turn this thing on. We've got all of our USB ports up here, 4 USB-A's. We've got 2 USB-C's. One is 20 watts. The other one was 100 watts. 2 AC outlets that share 600 watt output. They call it a sine wave output. It doesn't say pure sine wave. It's probably one of those kind of pure sine wave outputs. And then we've got a DC output here, 12 volts, 10 amps. That's kind of standard, 120 watts total output. And then we've got a little DC plug here, which is a 5521 output, which is also 12 volts, but only 3 amps max. And it does share that total 10 amps with the cigarette lighter plug. And then here's our input. So again, this input is good for our power brick from the AC, our car charger, and then our solar panels also. Now, as expected, this little guy right here is an adapter. This output here, they call that a 7406, which is what the input port is for all of our devices here. So that's going to go into there. And then this is going to be a more common input for a solar panel. So as the 7406, I've never seen that on a solar panel before. But if we look at one of these guys here, it's got this 8mm output here, similar to what you'd see on a Jackery, and that's going to plug right in. So this will give you an input from a solar panel. So as long as you have a solar panel that has either one of these on it, or it has some MC4 connectors like that, which you can use a cable like this to adapt to, then you'll be good to go. Now, as far as the specs go for this input port, since it is, everything plugs right into it, it is a DC input. And that DC input has a range of 10 to 25 volts and 12 amps max. So that works perfect for this guy, which is 24 volts, 7.5 amps. So that's your 180 watts right there. And that'd be good for your solar. Just make sure that your solar panels fall within that 10 to 25 volts up to 12 amps max. So you could have a single 100 watt panel, which is usually in that 18 to 20 volts. So you could parallel 2 of those together, which would give you about 20 volts at 10 amps or 200 watts, and this will use up to that 180 watts of it. So that's completely safe as long as you don't go over the 25 volts. Now, what might not be safe is the car charger, because your car charger is usually around 12 to 13 volts depending on your alternator, and it's usually fused inside your car at 10 amps, but this will accept that 12 volts up to 12 amps. So I'm not sure if that's going to blow the fuse in your car if you go to try it. You usually see these things limited at 8 amps, so that won't do that. But I'm sure there's a fuse in here. I'll take a look at what the fuse is in there to see if maybe you'll blow this thing before you blow your car. But either way, it's not perfect. And sure enough, it's got a little fuse in there. It looks like 15 amps, so that's not going to do you any good. But maybe I'll test that out and see what happens. But let's go ahead and get a charger hooked up to this thing, get it charging up, and start checking out the operation of it. Alright, so I've got the AC adapter plugged right into the front here. I'm going to try to tip this down so that you can see this nifty screen. Like I said, it's a circular screen. And it is very high resolution, nice and colorful. And we got on the left hand side here the input, and it's showing 173 watts. So that's pretty good coming out of a 180 watt charger. And on the right side we've got output, which is of course at 0 right now. And we've got a state of charge in the middle of 29%. With a little flashing lightning bolt showing that it's charging. And we've got 4 buttons around the screen here for different things. Powering it on and off, turning on and off the AC inverter, turning on and off the DC, and then the light also up top here. Now, one thing you missed, when I plugged it in, it played me a little song. So there's a speaker in there somewhere. So let me see if I can reproduce that again. I'm just going to unplug this. I'm going to turn the power off. Alright, so it is turned off now. And let me turn it on. Yeah, so cute little sound. Now, there is a speaker icon right there. I know it's kind of hard to see, but there's a speaker icon. And if I push and hold the light button, it puts a little mute speaker on there. And now that I look at it, that's probably not a speaker icon. The orange one is probably a light saying that the light is built in here. So we'll look at that in a second. But now, if I push any buttons, it's not going to make any noise. So I can turn the inverter on and off. No problem. But if I push and hold this for 3 seconds again, now that mute icon goes away. And if I turn on and off the AC, there's a little beep every time. So it's kind of neat that it's there. It's also kind of neat that they let you mute it as well. But yeah, plugging it in, it booted up automatically. It turned on and started charging right away at 173 watts. Now, absent from that little screen is a timer of any sort telling you how long it's going to take to get it completely full. That's always nice to have, but I haven't seen it on there. I don't know if I have to push a button for it to show up. It doesn't look like it. But that would be kind of nifty if it had, a time to charge or a time to discharge timer on there. So you'll just have to do some quick math to figure out what percentage you're at and how much longer you've got. But let me go ahead and grab a DC charger, and we're going to go ahead and test out the solar input and kind of simulate a solar panel or a group of solar panels plugged in there. So let me get that set up and I'll be right back. Alright, so let me show you what I got rigged up here. I've got a DC power supply here. I've got it set at 20 volts with a 5 amp limit. And I've got a couple connectors back there to get us to this orange cable that I showed you before. And that's going to plug into this adapter over here. And I've got this guy leaning down on some foam just so we can see the screen. And once I plug everything in, I'll zoom into the screen a little bit so you can see it better. But let's go ahead and plug in this adapter. And right away we see a little charging icon there. So let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit. So this input power here is going to start climbing up as it figures out what kind of voltage it's got and how much it can draw from it. And we're at, looks like 85 and climbing right now. And we have locked in the power supply. Is jumping around a little bit, but the power supply just locked in at 20 volts, 5 amps. It's saying that it's putting out 101 watts, and we see 97 watts coming in. So it is maxing out everything that we're giving it, and it's taken that full 100 watts in. So that's working great. So that would be simulating, again, like one solar panel at 20 volts, 5 amps. That gives you 100 watts. So what I'm going to do next is increase the current limit. And remember, the instructions said you can put 2 solar panels in parallel. Do not put them in series. If you put them in series, that 20 volts plus 20 volts would go up to 40 volts, which is above the input max of this. But it will take more than 10 amps. So we can put 2 5 amp panels together in parallel. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to crank it up to 10 amps max, which would theoretically be 200 watts of solar input. And I'm sure, based on its specs, it's going to cap that out at 180. So let's see what happens. All right, so I'm cranking up the current limit to the full 10 amps, and nothing much is happening. So I'm wondering if it wants to see that full 10 amps once it's plugged in. So let me go ahead and unplug it and plug it back in. And we're going to start back down at the bottom. 20 volts is going in. It's climbing up the current. Let's see how high it gets this time. Alright, so it has climbed above the 5 amps. I know you can't see the power supply, but I'll bring it up here in a second. It's up to 7, 8, 9, and we're at 170 watts. And looks like it's leveling out at 9. And the output, let me show it real quick if I can, is showing, where is it? Let me zoom out. 20 volts, 9.07 amps, 181.9, which is giving us an input of 170 watts. Now I've got a bunch of connectors, a bunch of adapters coming out of this thing. So I've got no doubt that 180 watts that's coming out of the power supply is getting chewed up a little bit by all those different cables I got plugged in. But it's still good that we're getting less than a 10% degradation, about 5% through all those cables. And we're getting 170 watts right into that input port. So pretty impressive. And this would be exactly like putting those two 100 watt panels. I know some people might be a little weary of plugging in 200 watts into something that says it has a 180 watt max. But as long as you stay within that voltage, this device is going to control the current, and it's only going to draw as much as it can. So in this case, it's only drawing 9 amps out of the 10 amps that we're giving it. And let me zoom out a little bit and show you why that's kind of neat. Because if we have our solar panels, which are supposed to be providing 20 volts in perfect sun, and we degrade them a little bit, let's say there's some shading, it should increase the current up as high as it can to get that full 180 watts into here. Alright, so the darn thing made a liar out of me. I tried this out, dropped it down to 18 volts, and it only goes up to 9 amps. So it is getting 152 watts in, but I was really hoping to see it go ahead and pull the full 10 amps. But still, anywhere in that 100 to 180 watts of solar, that's pretty decent input for a small little guy like this. So let me set up something for the cigarette lighter test and see what happens. Alright, so I want to do one more input test here before we get to the output test. And I'm going to test out this input one more time, this time with the cigarette lighter, which I said I had a little concern about before. So what I've done is I've rigged up this power supply here to 12.8 volts, kind of similar to what a car would be putting out. And I've got that wired up to the top of this battery box here, which has a cigarette lighter plug. And I'm not sure what kind of fuse it's got in there. I'm sure it's got some kind of fuse. But I've got this set to 11 amp limit. Now it's only a 10 amp power supply, but it lets me set it to 11 amps. And I've seen it drawn up to 11 amps before. So what I want to do is plug this in and then plug the charger port into there and see if it draws more than the 10 amps. That would tell me if it's likely to blow the fuse in your car, which is most of the time a 10 amp fuse. So let's plug this guy in here. The good news is this is a very stout cable. I've got no concerns about the cable at all. And let's plug this in here and flip the switch. And once we get this thing set up, I'll show you the screen. It is seeing an input already, and we do see this climbing up already. So it's drawn up to 5 amps already. And I am seeing an input of 60 watts. So we're sending it 65 watts. It sees an input of 60 watts. Let me let this sit here for a second and see if it draws any more. Okay, so I think this thing is smarter than I am. And let me explain that. I've seen this before where you have a single DC input that has a wide range of voltage and it can limit the current accordingly. And I'm guessing that's what's happening here. I think it's noticing that it's receiving 12 volts and it's making an assumption that it's plugged into a car and it's limiting itself to 5 amps. Because this has not jumped up above that 5.14 right there at all. Now, I don't think there's something in the connector, like an EcoFlow has a special connector that knows the difference between a solar panel and a car charger, and it limits its current accordingly. I think it's just simply the voltage. So heck, I'm curious enough. Let me go ahead and jump this voltage up and see if it jumps the current up once I get up above, a certain number. And sure enough, I went to 13.8. It didn't take long. It's drawn 8 amps now, and we're getting 100 watts in. So let me bring this up a little bit more. And interesting, I get up to 15 and it's limiting the current to keep this at about 100 watts. And yeah, once I get up above this 20 volts, now it's basically just simulating a solar panel again, and we're up to that full 180 watts. So don't try this with your car. Of course, some cars are 24 volt systems, which would be fine for this, but it's very impressive that it's got a scale of voltages in there that knows how to restrict its current based on the voltage it's seeing. Very nifty. Now with that in mind, be careful if you do have 12 volt solar panels, because it'll likely cap those at 5 amps, but you'll still be getting 60 watts. I don't know if I've seen any 12 volt solar panels that are much higher than that anyways. But I think we're done testing all the inputs. We didn't blow anything up. That's a good thing. Let's go ahead and start testing the outputs. Alright, so I wanted to test out these AC ports. So to do that, I've got a little space heater here, and I've got it plugged into one of the AC ports. Let me turn on the AC. And there we got a little light that says that it's on, and we heard a little song. Now this is capable of 600 watts. It does surge to 1200, but I always just count on the actual 600 watt part. So I'm going to turn on this space heater here onto the high setting, which should be under 500 watts. But let's see what the screen says here. And we've got an output of 416. Now again, we've got the information here about the state of charge, but we don't have any information about how long it thinks it's going to carry that for. So that would have been nice, but 416 watts coming out of the AC right here. And I can say that that is a little bit low for this one. If I plug this right into the wall, it would draw about 450 watts or so. So that tells me that the inverter in here isn't absolutely perfect, but it's doing just fine. I've seen a lot worse on some of the smaller, cheaper power stations. But this guy is definitely handling this 416 watts just fine. I haven't even heard the fans come on here. I've heard them come on before when I was doing some other tests, but it must be handling it just great. So I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead and test out the 100 watt power delivery. Let me get something to test that out, and we'll be right back. Alright, so I'm going to use my trusty Anker Solix C300 DC to test out this USB-C output. And this is an output only, so we'll go ahead and plug that in here. And this cable is rated for 140 watts. And this guy can take up to 140 watts. So let's plug it in. And we are charging, and we are charging at 96 watts. Now let me see if the display says anything about the DC output. And it does, so we actually see 98 watts coming out there. I wasn't sure if that was only going to be a power meter for the AC ports. But yeah, we definitely have 20 volts at 5 amps for power delivery. And we are charging this guy up at 97 watts. Nice. Alright, next thing I want to do is test out the DC output, the 12 volt. So let's go ahead and turn off that inverter. We don't need that. Let's turn on the DC. And we got a little green light down here. So let's plug in the cigarette lighter. Plug in there, and on the other side of this I've got a XT60, which I can plug right into the same Anker, and I believe this tops out at 100 watts, which is all I'm really looking for anyways. And sure enough, we got 98 watts coming out. Up top here I see it's showing 107 watts, so it must think that it's putting out 107. We're losing a little bit over the cable, and we're getting 99 in there. That sounds about right. So we've got a good test on everything. All the outputs work great. So the last thing I want to look at is that flashlight on the back. So let's check that out. Alright, so on the back side we saw this light before, and we saw that we could turn it on with the button on top here. And there is going to be some flashing of this, so let me just turn that on and go lower. And we got a SOS symbol, and then off again. And each time you do that, it does show up on the screen here. Let me show you that real quick. So we'll turn the light on, and it shows strong, 100%, weak, SOS, and then back off again. So that's kind of nifty that the screen actually tells you what you're doing. But this is supposed to be removable, so let's check that out. And sure enough, it's just kind of magneted in there. Now there is a couple contacts back here that make contact with this right here. You can see little gold pins in there, hopefully. If not, I can shine some light in there. And there you go. Now you can see the gold pins. And sure enough, we've got a removable, rechargeable little flashlight here that goes through the strong, the dim, and the SOS. And then press and hold for 3 seconds to turn it back off. So that's kind of nifty, and it does have a kickstand back here, and there's a little arrow right there don't do what I did and try to slide this to the right. You will hurt your fingernail pretty bad. All it's showing you is that you can stick your finger right where that arrow is pointing and just pull this out. So now we got a little kickstand, kind of neat. Stick it wherever you want, hang it somewhere. Just a nice little addition. A lot of power stations have flashlights on there for emergency use and stuff like that, but I've only seen a couple that have a removable one, and I kind of like that. Alright, so it's time to kind of summarize things up and give some final thoughts. And remember, it's not my job to tell you what to buy and what not to buy. It's my job just to explain all the features, explain all the specs, test everything out for you, and then let you make an educated decision if this is something that would work for you or not. But as far as what I think it did a great job for everything we tested from it. I think size-wise, it's a good combination of plenty of battery, plenty of power, and a small enough package. Only 17 pounds. It's got a nice carry handle. It doesn't take up a lot of room on a table. So this is perfect for something like camping, where you might put this on your picnic table or one of your, fold-out tables. And it's not, full, wide power station that's taking up a lot of room. Still got lots of ports, charging up lots of devices, 6 USB devices at the same time, 2 ACs, DC if you need it, and then the light is just another reason why it makes it perfect for camping. I could also see this as being something very popular for people that might need a CPAP. It says on the box that it'll run a CPAP for, 11 or 12 hours or something like that. I guess that depends on how many watts your CPAP draws. But again, it doesn't take up much room either beside the bed or on the nightstand, and it gives you plenty of power options depending on what it is that your device plugs into. So overall, I like it. I like the fact that there's a name that isn't super well known, but they're still putting out a great product. That's what keeps this industry so competitive, and whenever you have a lot of competition like that, the consumer is the one that always wins. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this review. I hope it was helpful to you. If it was, I appreciate a thumbs up. That helps out the channel. Go ahead and check out the rest of the channel. Lots of other reviews there for power stations, solar generators, power banks, and then a whole bunch of other geeky stuff too. If you have any questions about this device, go ahead and drop it down in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer it for you. And if you don't have a question, just type something down there like, "Hello, Chris," and I'll be happy to answer back to you. But I think that's going to wrap it up for this review. I thank you as always for watching. Until next time, peace out and geek out.